Okay, so why is it a topic for tonight? So the CAO, as people who have been there know, is a pack-in, pack-out location. You bring your stuff, you take it back out. There's no garbage collection, there's no recycling collection. You have to bring it home. The thing is, it's a busy site quite often. There's more than just you up there. There are plenty of people, so everyone throws their recycling in one place and one person gets to carry that home. That person might be taking it to any place in the GTA or even outside of the GTA. I don't know where all our members and users come from. And the problem is that the wrong items in the recycling load will contaminate it, and contamination is not a good thing. So, my qualifications on the subject. Since the start of the year, I actually inspect recycling for the City of Toronto. I'm not here as an official representative of the City of Toronto, although I asked my supervisor whether I can mention it, and he said, yeah, okay, no problem. More to the point, and I wanted to do this even before I started this position, is I have been at the CAO, I have taken home recycling, I have sorted out in my driveway, and I've had like 20 minutes of this is not really very good recycling. Ew, it was smelly and messy and sticky stuff. And my guess, this was like a year ago, 20% of what was in that recycling bag was not in fact valid recycling. Just to give you an example, these are some of the pictures of recycling bins I took today, and every one of those bins got sent off as garbage instead of recycling on my judgment. So it does happen. So, surprising things about recycling. And the first one is recycling does not mean you are doing good for the planet. So I think there's this feeling that, you know, I've put the stuff in the recycling, I get a gold ecological star. And unfortunately, that is not quite the case. The 3 R's, for the people who have learned them in school or heard about them, are in order of preference: reduce, reuse, and only then recycle. Recycling mitigates some of the impacts you have on the environment, but it's not something that makes the environment better, it just lessens the damage. For example, plastic single-use water bottles that people buy in those big packs. You can say that, okay, you know, the plastic bottle's recycling, I'm going to recycle the bottle, so it's all good. However, I mean, leaving aside the fact that this bottling factory is pulling out megaliters of water from some aquifer or some lake, the bottles need energy to be created. There's pollution and various environmental impacts from the making of the bottles. Then when they come to you, and of course they're shipped to you by a truck that causes lots of pollution, and you take it from the store home, which causes more pollution, and then you take it up to the CAO, carrying some more weight with you. In the end, you know, even if 90% of them get into the recycling stream, and I kind of doubt it, some of them wind up in Lake Ontario. I live close to the shoreline, and every time there's an onshore wind, it's amazing how many water bottles wind up washing up on shore. Even if they go into the recycling stream, they're not recycled perfectly. They'll probably come back as some degraded plastic product, you know, maybe packaging or something, because no one can guarantee that they're food safe anymore. And when that gets recycled, it gets degraded even more. So plastics and paper products, and paper is good recycling, but you can't recycle the same paper indefinitely. It becomes worse and worse until it winds up being sludge. So like about its 3rd trip through, it's toilet paper, and that's pretty much the end of the line for it. And I mean, speaking of plastic bottles, the new policy at the CAO is very much to encourage people to go up there and drink from the tap, and that is way better than coming up with some recyclable plastic bottles and taking them back and recycling them properly. So it's much better to reduce and reuse first. So, second thing that I want to tell you about recycling is that when that stuff goes to the transfer station or the recycling facility, no one looks through it and says, oh, this is some stuff that, oh, I think this is recyclable, and oh, this might not be recyclable. They're not going to figure it out for you. They're not going to sort it out for you, or they won't give you a gold star for trying. Like, don't be aspirational and think, well, this might be garbage, but I'm going to put it in recycling because it makes me feel better. And I think that's why I made that first point, that recycling isn't beneficial to the environment. I think that there's kind of this is, I don't know why I bought this stuff, but if I put it in the recycling bin, it's all good. Not really. People say, and I've heard people say, oh, this should be recyclable, or, this ought to be recyclable, but that doesn't change the various technical and logistical constraints and the financial constraints on what is actually able to be recycled in our current system. So, and again, I don't know the whole details of the process, but you've got whatever can be technically recycled, it's how much it costs, who wants to try to recycle it. So, when you think, well, this really ought to be recyclable, that doesn't really matter. You have to check to see whether it actually is recyclable under the current system. So the final thing is that if there's enough contamination in recycling, so I got a lot of recycling, it could be a bin, it could be your household bin, it could be a big bin. If there's enough contamination in there, the whole thing will go for garbage. No one's going to sit there and say, I'm going to pick out the 25% of contamination and recycle the rest of it. There's just not enough time, there are not enough people. A garbage truck will show up with 7 tons or 15 tons of recycling all packed in there. Trying to pick through that is not fun. Even the uncompressed bins that I look at, sometimes I go, ooh, I don't even know what's in there. So, one surprising conclusion about recycling is, if you are in doubt whether it's recycling or not, put it in the garbage. You're not destroying the environment just by putting it in the garbage. You may actually be saving the recycling. It's not quite that pessimistic. I'm going to get to the more optimistic stuff, but right. So you want to do your part, and I've just kind of knocked some gold star, do my best stuff out. I want to do my part, so don't be in doubt. So like I say, if you're in doubt, put it in the garbage. Don't be in doubt, know your stuff, and then yeah, this is definitely recycling, this definitely isn't recycling, and just go with that. Find out what is recyclable in your system. So I'm speaking as someone who knows what's going on in Toronto. Most of the other big municipalities will be similar. However, even in Toronto, if you own a house or probably a townhome and you take out your own bin to the curb, you are on city collection. So the city has certain rules. We have the green bin, we have the garbage bin, we have the recycling bin. It's all pretty clear. Same thing if you're in Mississauga or in Peel region or in Durham region or York region. If you're living in a larger apartment building, you may be on city collection in Toronto, or you may not be. You may be on a private collector who has different rules, if he has rules at all. And I don't know what that would be. You'd have to talk to your property manager, your landlord. Your property manager probably knows because they actually pay the bills as to who they're paying to take away your waste. It all costs money. So good sources of information. So up-to-date guide sheets, and I can't emphasize up-to-date enough because things change. Things become acceptable in the recycling stream, the technology changes a little bit, or something no longer is acceptable. So one thing that got me is I used to take my glass jars, I'd take the lid off, I'd rinse them out, I put the glass jars in the recycling bin, I put the lids in the garbage because that's what I remembered. I just looked at a recent sheet and they say put the lids back on. And the only way I find that out about that change is to actually review what I'm doing from time to time to understand if I've kept up with stuff. Online websites. So Toronto does have a nice online website. If you go to toronto.ca, and if we have some time, we can probably pull up that website at the end of this presentation. You just type in Google, I've got a horseshoe. What should I do with a horseshoe? Probably says put in the garbage. So it's called Waste Wizard, and there's also now an online phone app. I don't have a phone to be able to demonstrate it. But you can load it on your phone, just type in whatever it is that you have. It'll tell you. The one thing I would have to say is recycling is a huge, complicated business, so I don't know all the details, and you can probably catch me out on something that I don't know. Well, you can certainly catch me out on something that I don't know. No one really knows it because it's a case of, what the collections do, what happens at the transfer station, what happens at the reuse facility, which is contracted out, and then it has to go off to various recycling things, bundled up, shipped across the oceans. It's a huge logistics chain. But at least the Waste Wizard is kept up. And any sheets that you have, like if you get the waste calendar, which in Toronto we get a calendar saying, or at least I do as a homeowner, I get one that says, you know, your pickup is on Wednesdays and here's the schedule. It has those sheets saying, you know, here's what's recyclable, here's what isn't. Use that one. Throw away your old one from last year's calendar because things may have changed. So there are also bad sources of information. Recycling guides from a different system. Like if you're taking recycling from the CAO home to Mississauga, do not look at the Toronto recycling sheet because there might be some details that are going to be different. Different technology, different contractors, different processes. You don't know that. You have to actually look at who is going to take it where and go with that particular collection system's guidelines as to what's recyclable. Recycling guides more than a year old, things change. Get rid of the old ones, recycle them if possible. Uncle Marty, who has seen a YouTube video about recycling, I've had a few people say, I know what recycling is and I know how that plant works and what you're saying is not contamination. I don't really argue with them. I say, yes, sir, that's very interesting. Uncle Marty, who knows what's recyclable in his apartment building, as I mentioned before, a lot of apartment buildings in the City of Toronto, and I would expect the same to be true of other jurisdictions, are not on municipal collection. They have different rules, so if you're taking it back to your house and putting it in your own bin, you can't necessarily go by what's recyclable in an apartment building somewhere. Uncle Marty, who knows what's recyclable in his workplace? Same deal applies. Most businesses are not on city collection in the City of Toronto. They're done by private contractors. The private contractors might say this is recyclable or this isn't. I'm going to have an example of that a little bit later on. So don't listen to those things or don't listen to people saying, oh yeah, I'm sure that's recyclable because, you know, they might not know. If I say that, you can still challenge me, but I probably know a little better. So there's some things that are pretty universally recyclable. Things like newspapers, magazines, cardboard, corrugated boxes, or cereal boxes. But there are still exceptions there, like coated cardboard, the stuff that some vegetables come that's like waxed. That's not recyclable. So even there's little tricks, and you have to check things out. Metal cans, pretty much recyclable. I don't know whether other locations say what Toronto does, which is, you know, just pop the lid inside the can and kind of crush the can closed. It would make sense because that would mean that the sharp lids aren't really ready to come out and like cut something. Aluminum cans, probably one of the most valuable items in recycling. So you're probably safe to put that in the CAO's bin no matter who's taking that recycling home. Not recyclable in the City of Toronto. And I forgot one thing, which is black plastic, like black plastic plates, black plastic forks, black plastic whatever. Don't. Coffee cups, Tim's or whatever. Soft drink cups, McDonald's, Burger King, not recyclable, not organic, put them in the garbage. The interesting thing about that is I was talking about this with a friend on the weekend, and he said, well, Tim Hortons cups are recyclable in Mississauga. I went, that's interesting. I checked and they aren't. But he was saying he just goes out there to work. He lives in the region of Durham. He goes out to Mississauga to work. And at his workplace, the contractor says they're recyclable according to the guides. What I find a little bit interesting there is we know how many cups there are floating around. In Toronto, they're not recyclable. In Peel region, they're not recyclable. In York region, they're not recyclable. In Durham region, they're not recyclable. I kind of gave up there. If these big municipalities can't figure out how to recycle Tim Hortons cups, what is that contractor doing, I wonder? Like sometimes they say, put your recyclables here, but you don't know what happens when the truck comes. I kind of have an idea because I see those trucks. Sometimes they chase us around on our routes because we just have to keep ahead of them. Paper towels or napkins, not recycling. Like I was saying, things degrade over time. So the paper towels, by this point, if you try to recycle them, they turn into porridge. They've been recycled so many times, the wood fibers get shorter and shorter and shorter until they're just like sludge. So put them in the composting bin if you're taking it back to the City of Toronto. Do not put it in recycling. That's one of the big problems we have with schools and community centers. They have bags and bags of paper towels and they put them in the recycling. We have to tell them, no, this doesn't work. Random pieces of plastic packaging. So as I mentioned, there's no one at the transfer station who's going to go look at those little numbers on some random piece of plastic. They go by the shapes. So it's all sorting and saying, okay, this is a margarine tub, so we kind of know what a margarine tub is made of, and it's part of this stream. No one's going to pull this item of whatever it is that isn't like a defined item and look and see whether it says, 1 in the little triangle or 3 or whatever. So don't even bother. Wood, metal bits, stocks, stuffed toys, yesterday's ice pilaf. I've seen all those in recycling bins. So, I mean, it's funny, but it's true. It happens too often. I'd be shocked that drinking goes on at the CAO, but I've heard reliable reports that possibly might. So the problem with cans like that is unless you thoroughly empty and probably rinse out the empties, you get beer pooling in the bottom of the bag, and I have to struggle with that with some recycling that I took back. And that's contamination right there. As soon as it's like floating, that's not good at all. The beer store takes back everything. So the man has already taken your deposit. Now, do you want to leave the man with your 10 cents or 20 cents? Maybe you do. But then give it to charity. I understand that there's actually a separate basket at the CAO where you can put in your depositable containers, and it gets collected by charities, and it actually goes to someplace useful. So don't throw your beer bottles or your wine bottles in the recycling bin. It doesn't help in a couple of different ways. So maybe, I don't know how well that's marked. Maybe someone can mention it afterwards for questions, but I think we want to make it pretty clear. In fact, if you go to the beer store's website, you find out what they take back, and you can see where it's underlined. It's kind of small text, but they do say, we take back all bottles, cans, cartons, caps, kegs, plastic bags, and can rings that we sell to consumers. So even the beer caps. If you're going back with your empties, they say, we should, in a different part of the website, I'm not going to go into the details, they say throw the beer caps into a plastic bag separately. Beer caps are not recycling, so if you do say, I'm going to leave that bottle for charity, I guess you just throw the caps in the garbage. And you can find out more details about how they want stuff arranged on their website. I actually hadn't gone there before, so again, I'm learning something from this, in fact. Okay, so try to know who is taking the CAO recycling ahead of time. So I don't know how things are arranged, but if one person says, yeah, I'll take it, find out, are you taking it to the City of Toronto? Are you taking it to Peel Region? Let us know, and then we kind of know which rules of engagement we have to go with. Hopefully that person is better up on, if it's a different region, hopefully they know what is recyclable and what isn't. If you wind up leaving out some things that are recyclable in their system by accident, it's not the end of the world. What we don't want is you putting stuff in that isn't recyclable. Like I say, contaminating it is actually worse than leaving 1 or 2 items out just to be safe. It's always good to confirm and check even the well-known items. So people probably know that in the City of Toronto, a pie plate or an aluminum roasting pan is recyclable. How about aluminum foil? It's not recyclable. It's too lightweight, it flies away, so put the aluminum foil in the garbage. Just as soiled paper plates soiled with food are recyclable, organics. No, I did not say recycling, I said organics. But if it's wax paper, it's garbage, because wax paper is not compostable. And there's all these little things, and I wish it wasn't the case. I wish it was much simpler than that, but I'm not sure how it can possibly be simpler. It could be if we hiked our garbage fees by 1,000% and had people picking out the stuff that works and doesn't work, but that's a whole different sort of ball game. Remember, if in doubt, put it in the garbage. I mean, it might up the garbage, but honestly, if you hide 25% of your garbage in the recycling, you're still creating garbage and possibly a bigger problem for the valid recycling in the recycling bin. A couple quick tips that I can think of. If your recycling bag has to be double bagged for you to take it back to wherever you're taking it, it's probably contaminated and garbage right there. Like if there's liquid sloshing about, that's not good. Toronto is okay with organics and regular plastic bags, unlike Peel Region, which I believe specifies that it has to be biodegradable or compostable. Toronto is fine with regular bags, just don't have a cucumber in a bag and put it in another bag and another bag. The more layers of plastic, the harder it is to get the cucumber out from the layers of plastic. So in conclusion, yes, please do recycle because it does take stuff out of our landfill, but do it with care. You should definitely, what happened there? Did I press something? Maybe I can just go to the grand finale and... I was wondering if we can take some questions in the meantime. All right? Okay, so we've got a question right here. The mic's coming here.
Can glossy paper be included in newsprint? Can glossy paper be included in the newspaper box? You know how there's inserts or additions to a newspaper?
Generally, yes. So you can put, say, glossy magazines in recycling, no problem. I think there can be some limits to that, like if it's like magazines with perfume packets, that's not so good. You'd have to pull out the perfume packets, and certainly if it's foil paper, like foil Christmas wrap, that is not recyclable. You know, that's one that I would probably, if you only have a few kind of fairly glossy things, but it's still kind of obviously paper, maybe with a lot of printing on it, yes, I would put it in there. Yep, I would recycle that.
Ed,
yes.
what about the more practical? Maybe we should be thinking about just what does Grey or Simcoe County doing with their recycling, and we try disposing of it instead of from the CAO all the way back to the GTA, from the CAO to a dump site somewhere nearby.
You could try to do that, yep. The limitations that I find on smaller municipalities is the hours of opening may be awkward. So if we have a good New Moon weekend, they may only open on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I don't know, like it would also, and for another thing is you would need the license to dispose of it in the proper county. I believe the CAO is in Grey County. Like you're not going to take it to Simcoe County because they're going to say, what are you doing? Because you're not a resident of Simcoe County. And that's another possible problem. I don't know for sure, but I know my friend who's got a cottage, he's got a card, so they don't let any people just into the transfer facility. You have to have your card and you have to show it and say, yes, I'm this property owner. So it's worth investigating for the CAO committee. I'm not sure how practical it would be. You'd have to see what sort of restrictions Grey County has, what their opening hours are, where the location is. The other thing I would say is, you know, you're going home and you probably have a garbage and recycling bin at home. The Simcoe or the Grey County ones may not be on the way. They might be in Meaford, let's say. I don't know. Yes?
Okay. For me, this is interesting. I live in a condominium building.
Yes.
And we have a quote-unquote green committee.
Yes.
And I think they do a good job. They had a survey, people come in and survey our garbage and our recycling and such,
Yes.
in an attempt to improve the recycling. But the argument they use is that we're paying, this is what I've been told anyway, we're paying for the garbage. So if we can decrease the garbage, we don't have to pay as much to the city, but we don't have to pay for the recycling.
That is a very good point, and I will confess that I wanted to check your building the other day, but it had already been picked up. It was on our secondary route after we'd done our primary route. Just saying. It's not quite that simple. Yes, you pay for the garbage all the time and your recycling is free. If you contaminate your bin with too much garbage, like I had those pictures of it, you pay for that bin. So you do not save money by throwing stuff in the recycling.
Because I think our condo fees are high, so people are always trying to save money. And when I go to throw my recycling in the bins, I see stuff that I know should not be in there.
Well, I'm going to just make a note of
Oh,
that.
so you're,
You know,
and now
tomorrow in the office.
you know where I live, so you.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, so what you're saying is that if there's enough of that in that bin, they know where they got it and they will charge it back to us.
Correct, and it's worse than that. So if it's a 25% contamination in these big bins, and I'm talking the big dumpster bins that are like yay high and big, so it's 25% contamination. You could obviously take like 4 recycling bins and fill 1 garbage bin, which you'd pay for. But if all 4 of them are contaminated enough, all 4 of them go as garbage, and you wind up paying more because you wind up paying for 5 bins instead of, you know, an extra garbage bin.
You to my manager.
Sure. All right, just to finish off here, now that we have transmission back from recycling land, smaller lots of high quality recycling or organics are much better than larger quantities where you kind of say, I feel less guilty by throwing this in the recycling. It really is better. It's easier on the system. It's cheaper for us to sort it out. We don't have to do the sorting. So that's the way to go. You're doing something good by throwing stuff in the garbage. It's not like, my God, I feel better if I throw this random object into the recycling bin. And in fact, I was pretty much at the end anyway. So are there... Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. But so you did ask what the committee is doing towards looking how to properly handle both waste and recycling. I should point out, because we are a landowner in Greytown, in the municipality of the Blue Mountains, we have checked with the waste department, and the reason why we don't have a bin of our own for waste and for recycling on our own driveway is because, as most people know, our road does not get year-round service, because there's no winter service once the road closes in with snow in November or beyond, and then until the road opens again in May or so. So their trucks cannot service our property, our driveway. But what we've been advised to do is to contact the local neighbor, someone who is on road service year-round, and be able to negotiate to put our own bin next to their bin at their driveway. So this is something we've been trying to do. It's kind of a moving target, and we had such a relationship with the property that was owned by the Jorgensens up until recently, until they sold. So we were allowed to put our garbage and recycling there, which we were doing. But since the property was sold, we've not actually been able to contact the new owner. So we're in the process now of trying to negotiate with a convenient driveway on the 6th line. We do have people on the 21st side road that we probably could hook up with, but we don't want people to have to make a sort of a milk run, depending on how they're going back to the city, to be able to take garbage to our bin. But once we do get bins, both for garbage and for recycling, then we will have very defined lists of what can go into our recycle in our own Blue Mountain pickup. But in the meantime, yes, it is what it is. But that's where we are anyway.
Yep. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions? Here we go.
It's less of a question, more of a comment. For our last speaker, I want to thank you for recycling your presentation.
I think it might be closer to reuse, but that's even better.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ed.
Thanks.